When I found 98 brand new houses worth $34 million sitting on land I'd owned for 30 years, that HOA Karen thought she'd pulled off the perfect heist. Too bad she just handed me the deed to her entire subdivision. Picture coming home to discover an entire neighborhood where your cattle used to graze. Families unpacking U-Hauls, kids chalking driveways, all on your property without permission. Victoria Ashworth had the audacity to serve me with a restraining order, claiming I was threatening families with surveying equipment. This woman stole my land, then painted me as the dangerous neighbor terrorizing innocent children. What she didn't know, my grandfather's 1924 contract means every house she built automatically became mine the moment they poured the first foundation. Soon she'd learn why you never steal from a land surveyor who's been documenting property theft for 40 years, especially when federal law is on your side. Before we dive in, what would you do if someone built 98 houses on your land? Drop your revenge fantasies below and tell me where you're watching from. My name is Ezekiel Thornfield. Friends call me Zeke. And I'm what you might call old-school Tennessee stubborn. At 67, I've spent 40 years as a land surveyor, walking property lines and settling boundary disputes across 3 counties. My grandfather left me 847 acres of prime rolling hills back in '94, along with a piece of advice: boy, never trust a man who measures land without getting his boots muddy. My late wife Martha used to say I kept property records like other men collect baseball cards, obsessively and with pride that borders on insanity. When she passed 5 years ago, our 2 kids moved off to chase city dreams in Portland and Atlanta. Can't blame them for wanting more excitement than watching grass grow, but it left me rattling around a 1952 farmhouse with just my heritage cattle and memories. Enter Victoria Ashworth. Call me Vicky. The kind of woman who treats a clipboard like a nuclear weapon and speaks in passive-aggressive corporate speak that could make Gandhi throw punches. At 52, she's mastered that suburban HOA president look, blonde highlights fresh from the salon, white Lexus SUV detailed weekly, and the dead-eyed smile of someone who's reported neighbors for having the wrong shade of mailbox. Vicky's married to Brad Ashworth, our town councilman, which around Sweetwater Springs means she thinks she's royalty. For 8 years, she had been circling my property like a buzzard, sending intermediaries with insulting offers for my unused pasture land. The real trouble started when I returned from a 3-week visit helping my daughter Sarah through a messy divorce in Oregon. Driving up my gravel driveway, something felt wrong. Instead of cattle lowing and meadowlarks singing, I heard the suburban symphony of lawnmowers humming and children shrieking. I grabbed my surveying equipment and headed toward the noise. What I found made my coffee mug slip from my hands and explode against a limestone rock. 98 pristine houses spread across my land like a suburban infection. Manicured lawns where my Angus cattle used to graze. A decorative stone entrance reading Heritage Meadows Estates in script fancier than a wedding invitation. Families unpacking U-Hauls, kids drawing chalk masterpieces on driveways, golden retrievers chasing tennis balls. The whole American dream package built on every acre of my back pasture. That's when Vicky materialized in a golf cart wearing an official HOA badge. "Excuse me, sir," she announced. "This is private property. Heritage Meadows is a gated community for residents and invited guests only." I looked around at my trees, my creek, the land where my grandfather taught me to respect property boundaries. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I think there's been some kind of mistake. This is my property. Has been since 1994. Vicky's laugh sounded like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Oh, honey. I'm afraid you're confused. The Heritage Meadows development was purchased legally from Millbrook Development Corporation 2 years ago." She pulled out a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "I'm sure this is just a surveying error on your part." That's when I knew this wasn't a mistake. This was a con job wrapped in suburban righteousness. 3 days later, Deputy Mike Ashworth knocked on my door with papers and a smirk. The restraining order claimed I'd trespassed on Heritage Meadows property and threatened residents with surveying equipment in a menacing manner. The order prohibited me from entering my own back 40, and Mike made sure to mention that violation meant jail time. Vicky organized a neighborhood safety committee that patrolled my property line, snapping photos of me feeding my own cattle like I was running a meth lab. The social media assault came next, with Vicky posting photos claiming my unkempt property was attracting vermin and lowering property values. But here's where 40 years of surveying experience pays dividends. While Vicky was busy playing victim online, I drove to the county courthouse and started pulling records. The filing fee for that supposed property transfer caught my eye immediately, $50 measly. The real smoking gun was the notary stamp. Eleanor Hutchkins had handled real estate closings for 3 decades, but Eleanor died 6 months before she allegedly notarized my property transfer. Unless she was signing documents from the great beyond, somebody had forged her stamp. I called my old surveyor buddy, Clarence Bulldog Mackenzie. Bulldog spent 2 days with his GPS equipment walking every inch of my boundaries. "Zeke," he finally said, "your property lines are accurate within 6 inches. That whole subdivision is sitting on your land like fleas on a hound dog." While I was building my case, Vicky escalated to psychological warfare. Security guards started patrolling Heritage Meadows. Then came the state licensing board complaint claiming I was mentally declining and dangerous to public safety. The county threatened to condemn my farmhouse as a public nuisance. That evening, checking my fence line, I noticed security cameras hidden in my oak trees with cables snaking back toward Heritage Meadows. They'd been tapping into my power meter to run surveillance equipment. I sat in Martha's garden wondering if I should just take whatever money Vicky offered and retire somewhere warm. Then I remembered my grandfather's words after the railroad company tried to steal our mineral rights back in '89, "Son, when someone tries to steal your land, they're not just taking dirt. They're stealing your family's history." 2 weeks later, Vicky pulled her media card. Channel 7 News rolled up to Heritage Meadows like they were covering a presidential assassination. The story? Elderly man's delusions threaten young families. They interviewed concerned mothers clutching designer babies, painted me as a confused hermit living in the past, and gave Vicky 5 uninterrupted minutes to perform her Oscar-worthy victim routine. But while Vicky was busy winning Emmy Awards for fake crying, I was doing what surveyors do best, following paper trails and connecting dots. My property insurance got cancelled the next morning, claiming significant change in land usage voided my policy. Turns out Vicky worked part-time for Mutual Trust Insurance, the same company that dropped me. She'd used her database access to sabotage my coverage. Judge Harold Python scheduled an emergency hearing. Python golfed with Brad every Thursday and owned stock in 3 development companies. Meanwhile, Vicky convinced Heritage Meadows families that their property values would crater if the crazy old man won. She created a defense fund and collected $50,000 for legal expenses, money that funded the Ashworth's European vacation. The intimidation escalated fast. Dead animals appeared on my porch. Nails scattered across my driveway flattened my truck tires twice. Anonymous calls promised accidents happened to stubborn old men at 3 a.m. They blocked access to my own mailbox, claiming it sat on Heritage Meadows easement property. That's when my guardian angel arrived wearing jeans and carrying a notebook. Ruby Morgan, investigative reporter for the Nashville Tribune, had moved to small-town Tennessee seeking peace after big city burnout. She approached me after watching Channel 7's Hatchet Job. "Mr. Thornfield," she said, "I've covered enough white-collar crime to recognize a con job. Mind if I examine your documentation?" Ruby spent 3 days independently reviewing public records, confirming my ownership, and discovering Heritage Meadows marketing materials dated 2 years before the alleged purchase. Her experience covering financial fraud taught her that internet archives never lie. The Wayback Machine revealed deleted web pages showing development plans from 2021, proving premeditation. She uncovered Brad's sealed juvenile record for real estate fraud in Kentucky. Our town councilman had previous experience stealing property, just never attempted grand theft on this scale. The county escalated to eminent domain threats, claiming Heritage Meadows provided essential housing for community growth. They appraised my 847 acres at $80,000 agricultural value, ignoring the $12 million residential potential. My water well got contaminated overnight. Cattle started showing poisoning symptoms traced to Heritage Meadows storm drain runoff. Stress finally caught up with me. Hospital admission for chest pains. That's when Vicky visited with crocodile tears and a $200,000 settlement offer. "Zeke," she whispered, leaning over my hospital bed. This could all disappear tomorrow. Think about your family. Is dirt really worth dying over? Lying there with heart monitors beeping, I realized this transcended property disputes. This was about stopping criminals who'd victimized an entire community while hiding behind suburban respectability. Getting out of that hospital felt like waking into a war zone. Brad introduced an emergency city council resolution to annex Heritage Meadows into Sweetwater Springs city limits, a bureaucratic masterstroke that would override county property laws. Ruby's investigation shifted into overdrive, uncovering document fraud that made Watergate look like amateur hour. Computer forensics revealed Brad's operation was stealing digital signatures from legitimate transactions. The Eleanor Hutchkins forgery wasn't isolated. They'd been grave-robbing dead notaries' identities across 4 counties. Heritage Meadows families started receiving HOA special assessments demanding thousands per household to fund the legal battle, threatening foreclosure for non-payment. She was literally extorting the people she'd supposedly protected. Several families contacted me secretly, voices trembling over phone calls made after midnight. I hired an independent building inspector using Ruby's newspaper budget. What he found made my surveyor's soul weep: 47 major code violations, including houses built on wooden platforms over buried swampland without proper septic permits. Vicky's desperation peaked when she tried bribing Dr. Stevens to declare me mentally incompetent. $20,000 to falsify dementia diagnosis. The good doctor recorded every word. The environmental revelation hit like lightning. Ruby discovered Heritage Meadows was built over federally protected wetlands without EPA permits, violating environmental laws. They destroyed rare salamander breeding grounds, triggering Endangered Species Act violations carrying $25,000 daily fines. Danny Kowalski, the former construction foreman, finally broke his silence, providing copies of the real environmental survey plus photos of Brad ordering crews to dump concrete over protected wetlands. Ruby's financial investigation traced Heritage Meadows funding through shell companies connected to overseas accounts that screamed money laundering. The construction loans were secured using my property as collateral without my knowledge, creating fraud so blatant that bank executives would face federal conspiracy charges. Property deeds were worthless. Title insurance excluded contested land coverage. Families faced losing homes while still owing mortgages on houses they never legally owned. Vicky announced a Heritage Meadows Family Festival to demonstrate community support, scheduling it for the same day as the City Council annexation vote. But two can play the timing game. Ruby coordinated federal EPA inspectors to schedule their wetlands investigation for Festival Day. Danny agreed to testify about environmental cover-ups. I compiled evidence packages showing the full fraud scope, including my grandfather's 1924 railroad contracts that these amateurs never researched. Ruby's phone call at 6 a.m., 3 days before the festival, changed everything. "Zeke, get down to the courthouse basement right now. I found something that's going to blow this case apart." The railway archives revealed original 1924 railroad easement contracts sealed in manila envelopes that hadn't seen daylight since Eisenhower was president. Your grandfather was a stone-cold genius, Zeke. Look at Clause 7. My hands trembled reading the faded typewriter text. Ezekiel Thornfield Sr. hadn't just negotiated mineral rights with Tennessee Central Railroad. He'd secured development protection stronger than Fort Knox. Any unauthorized structures built on Thornfield property would automatically transfer ownership to the family along with every improvement, fixture, and blade of grass. The contract language was ironclad. Filed with the Federal Railway Commission, it carried jurisdiction that made state property law look like suggestions scrawled on napkins. No county judge, city council, or HOA queen could touch these rights. Ruby's detective work revealed my property extended 200 feet beyond current survey markers, encompassing not just 98 houses, but Heritage Meadows clubhouse, swimming pool, tennis courts, and that precious 9-hole golf course where Brad played every weekend. Total theft includes recreational facilities worth $8 million, Ruby calculated. Under your grandfather's contract, Vicky just handed you a $42 million gift wrapped in suburban stupidity. The beautiful irony made me laugh until tears ran down my cheeks. 98 houses at $350,000 each, plus amenities, all mine, thanks to a contract these amateurs never researched. The 1924 agreement had no statute of limitations, meaning their fraud actually strengthened my position. Ruby had traced Brad's connection to the Railway Historical Society, discovering he'd accessed these same documents 3 years ago. Email evidence revealed a detailed theft plan, knowing about the easement clause but gambling I'd never find the original contracts. Marcus Webb arrived looking like federal justice in a tailored suit. This silver-haired prosecutor had spent 40 years sending white-collar criminals to prison. "Your grandfather's 1924 contract is tighter than bark on a tree," Marcus said. "I've prosecuted 12 railway easement cases. This language is so bulletproof it could stop a freight train." Dr. Sarah Lightfoot joined via video call, her EPA credentials adding environmental felonies to our growing list of charges. "The salamander species they destroyed is federally protected," she explained. "Daily fines compound faster than a teenager's credit card debt. We're talking generational bankruptcy." Danny Kowalski spread blueprints across Ruby's table, revealing engineering disasters. "These houses are death traps on stilts. Brad ordered pressure-treated lumber instead of proper concrete pilings to save money. Families are living in expensive houseboats that don't know they're sinking yet." Patty Goldman, our forensic accountant, connected financial dots with enthusiasm. "Total fraud exceeds $89 million. They pre-sold 150 lots using fake ownership documents. Bernie Madoff would be impressed." Ruby orchestrated media strategy with military precision. EPA inspection at 11 during opening ceremonies, federal marshals at 1 during face painting. My story goes live at 2 when families check phones over barbecue. My biggest concern was protecting innocent families caught in Vicky's web. Marcus had researched victim compensation programs while I developed fair rent-to-own agreements for residents who wanted to stay. "These people bought the American dream from professional liars," I insisted. "I'll expose the criminals without destroying the casualties." The evening before Festival Day, I visited Martha's grave as sunset painted the sky colors she'd loved. Kneeling beside her headstone, breathing the sweet scent of honeysuckle, I made a promise. Tomorrow would expose 20 years of corruption while protecting families who'd been victimized by their own dreams. Vicky had planned a festival to celebrate her theft. Instead, she was about to host the most expensive public confession in Tennessee history. Festival morning arrived with picture-perfect weather. Heritage Meadows sparkled like a movie set decorated with enough balloons and banners to make Disney World jealous. The smell of barbecue smoke and cotton candy mixed with fresh-cut grass. Vicky had pulled out every manipulation trick in the suburban playbook. Children's choirs performed at the opening ceremony. Local politicians gave speeches about protecting family values. Media cameras focused on sympathetic families while carefully avoiding the federal agent's position discreetly around the festival grounds. The night before, someone had cut my internet and phone lines. My truck tires got slashed again and a threatening note appeared on my windshield. Ruby's car got vandalized with spray paint reading "Media Lies." Brad had called an emergency city council meeting for Saturday morning, pushing the Heritage Meadows annexation vote with desperation. My bank accounts got frozen Friday afternoon, supposedly due to suspicious activity. Suddenly I couldn't access funds for legal fees or groceries, financial warfare designed to force surrender through starvation. Construction crews arrived overnight with truckloads of clean soil to cover contaminated areas, attempting to hide environmental violations before EPA inspection. Danny documented the cover-up with hidden cameras, capturing federal obstruction of justice that carried 5-year prison sentences. Vicky hired Nashville's most aggressive law firm, filing a $50 million defamation suit against Ruby and her newspaper. Someone tipped off EPA inspectors about security threats at the festival, filing anonymous complaints about federal overreach. Festival Day crystallized into the final battleground where truth would face suburban lies under bright Tennessee sunshine. Vicky orchestrated her final performance at the festival gazebo, staging a public settlement meeting with all the subtlety of a Broadway musical. She'd brought microphones, speakers, and an oversized cardboard check for $300,000. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the gathering crowd, dabbing her eyes with tissues that looked suspiciously dry. "I'm here to demonstrate how reasonable people can resolve conflicts without destroying families. I played my part in this theatrical farce, pretending to consider her offer while federal agents positioned around the festival like pieces on a chessboard. Dr. Sarah Lightfoot arrived discreetly during the children's puppet show, carrying EPA testing equipment disguised in a family picnic basket. She began soil and water sampling, discovering fresh concrete poured over wetlands overnight, evidence tampering that added federal obstruction charges to the growing list. Ruby's financial investigation had uncovered the international money laundering connection that morning. Heritage Meadows was funded through Russian shell companies connected to a real estate fraud ring operating in 12 states. Brad Ashworth wasn't just a small-town crook. He was connected to an international criminal enterprise. Maria Santos, the elementary school teacher who lived in Heritage Meadows with her 2 young daughters, approached Ruby during the face-painting activity. Her hands trembled as she showed forged notary signatures on her deed. "I trusted them," Maria whispered. "They said we were buying our forever home, but everything was lies." The media ambush came during lunch hour when Brad arranged a surprise television interview to attack my credibility. Channel 7's cameras rolled as he portrayed me as a confused elderly man endangering innocent families. The interview was interrupted by federal marshals serving arrest warrants live on television. Brad's face transformed from smug confidence to panic faster than a teenager caught shoplifting as handcuffs clicked around his wrists during the broadcast. Vicky's meltdown began when she realized Brad's arrest exposed their entire conspiracy. Standing beside the bounce house where toddlers played innocent games, she started screaming at federal agents about constitutional rights and government persecution. Ruby's newspaper released the complete evidence package online while families ate barbecue and checked their phones. Interactive timelines showed 4 years of fraud conspiracy. Financial records proved international money laundering. Document comparisons revealed systematic forgery. Reverend Mitchell organized an emergency resident meeting at the Methodist Church, providing sanctuary for displaced families while legal aid volunteers offered free consultation. EPA testing revealed groundwater contamination affecting the entire area, forcing immediate evacuation of Heritage Meadows families to local motels at federal expense. The water supply was declared unsafe, and cleanup estimates reached $25 million. U.S. Marshals secured Heritage Meadows as a federal crime scene, giving residents 48 hours to remove personal belongings before evidence collection began. The corruption web unraveled faster than cheap yarn. County Sheriff Mike Ashworth got arrested for accepting bribes. 3 city council members faced federal charges for money laundering. The bank president was indicted for mortgage fraud. FBI opened investigations into all Ashworth business dealings, discovering systematic theft spanning 2 decades. Vicky's desperate flight attempt came as federal agents tightened the noose. Airport security caught her at Nashville International with suitcases containing $2.3 million in bearer bonds. The bonds traced to Cayman Islands accounts connected to the Russian money laundering network. National media trucks arrived as the story gained momentum. Social media hashtags trended nationally, proving that authentic David versus Goliath stories still captured American hearts. I stepped to the microphone, wearing my grandfather's surveyor compass around my neck like a talisman, holding the original 1924 railroad easement document. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, looking directly at Vicky, who stood frozen like a deer in headlights. "I'm here to set the record straight about my family's land and the criminals who thought they could steal it." I read key passages from my grandfather's contract aloud, explaining how the 1924 railroad easement automatically transferred ownership of any unauthorized construction to the Thornfield family. "Every house, every streetlight, every blade of grass in Heritage Meadows belongs to me under federal law," I announced, holding up the yellow document. My grandfather was smart enough to protect our family from exactly this kind of theft. Vicky pushed through the crowd like a woman possessed, grabbing the microphone with desperation. "This is all lies and fake documents," she screamed, her carefully maintained suburban composure finally cracking like cheap veneer. "These people are part of a conspiracy against working families." That's when U.S. Attorney Marcus Webb stepped forward with arrest warrants. "You have the right to remain silent," Marcus said as federal marshals placed handcuffs on Vicky's wrists. Maria Santos stepped forward to speak for families who'd been victimized. "We just wanted homes for our children," she said, her voice trembling. "We didn't know about any fraud.
We trusted these people with our life savings.
I took the microphone back, addressing the confused families with compassion.
You folks are victims too. This isn't your fault. We'll work together to make this right.
I'm offering fair rent-to-own agreements for anyone who wants to stay while we sort out the legal mess.
Dr. Lightfoot dropped the environmental bombshell, presenting soil contamination findings.
The subdivision was built over toxic waste from an old chemical plant.
All residents must evacuate immediately for health safety.
The media feeding frenzy exploded as reporters fired questions faster than an auctioneer's chant. County Sheriff Mike Ashworth arrived attempting to assert local authority over federal agents, only to discover he was also under investigation when federal marshals handed him his own arrest warrant. Ruby stepped forward to provide context for the gathered media, explaining how her investigation had uncovered a conspiracy spanning 4 years in multiple states. The mic drop moment came when I pulled out my surveyor's measuring tape and walked to the property line. This tape measure doesn't lie, unlike some people, I said, looking directly at Vicky being loaded into a federal transport vehicle. From the back of the police car, Vicky screamed her final outburst, revealing the true character behind her suburban mask with racial slurs that confirmed the discriminatory motives Ruby had suspected all along. 6 months later, Heritage Meadows stood like a suburban ghost town. Yellow EPA tape fluttered where manicured lawns once spread their artificial perfection. The sweet scent of honeysuckle had returned as nature reclaimed stolen land. My cattle grazed peacefully where cookie-cutter McMansions once squatted. The legal aftermath delivered justice with federal efficiency. Vicky Ashworth got 15 years in federal prison. Brad received 20 years for racketeering, while Sheriff Mike Ashworth and 3 city council members earned 5-year vacations courtesy of the federal penitentiary system. 23 Heritage Meadows families accepted my rent-to-own offers, building sustainable homes on properly zoned land that respected environmental regulations and actual property rights. Maria Santos became our community liaison, her children now playing in clean streams where toxic runoff once flowed. The Thornfield Foundation launched with $20 million from the property windfall, funding scholarships for first-generation college students. The Martha Thornfield Memorial Library anchors Sweetwater Springs downtown, offering free legal aid clinics that help property owners protect themselves from corporate predators. 400 acres became the Thornfield Wildlife Sanctuary, protecting endangered salamanders and wetlands that educate future generations about environmental stewardship. Ruby's Pulitzer Prize launched her Washington Post career, but she returns annually for our Thornfield Heritage Festival. Her Emmy-winning documentary became required viewing in journalism schools. Danny Kowalski testified before Congress about construction corruption, strengthening whistleblower protections that bear his name. His environmental restoration company employs other workers who chose conscience over corporate pressure. The national impact exceeded our expectations. FBI investigations uncovered similar schemes in 47 communities, shutting down $2.3 billion in fraudulent developments. Congressional task forces created federal property verification requirements that protect families from professional thieves masquerading as community developers. I teach surveying at the community college now, sharing 40 years of experience with students who will protect the next generation from boundary disputes and property fraud. Key lesson: accurate measurements and honest documentation built America. Everything else is just expensive decoration. Environmental recovery exceeded our wildest hopes. Endangered species returned to restored wetlands. Educational boardwalks allow school groups to study ecosystem recovery. Research data helps farmers adapt to climate change while protecting sensitive habitats. Personal healing came like Tennessee sunrise, gradually then suddenly. I visit Martha's grave each evening, reporting community progress and scholarship recipients who benefit from our stand against corruption. Her journal's final entry still guides me: Zeke fights for what's right, not what's easy. Here's what this taught me. Standing up for what's right often means standing alone initially, but honest documentation and principled allies attract good people to your cause. My grandfather understood that land represents responsibility to future generations who deserve better than environmental destruction disguised as progress. Property rights matter because they protect families from predators who exploit the American dream for profit.
When someone tries to steal your land, they're stealing your family's history and your children's future. Have you battled HOA nightmares or property disputes? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might provide the courage another family needs to fight back against professional thieves hiding behind community development. Together, we can expose fraud before it destroys more families. Subscribe to HOA Stories for more tales of ordinary people defeating extraordinary corruption. Your support helps us investigate small-town fraud, proving that justice prevails when honest folks unite against suburban schemes and environmental destruction. Thanks for watching HOA Stories. If this episode made you laugh or shake your head at HOA madness, hit that like button and drop your opinion below. We post HOA Karen chaos and neighborhood showdowns every week, so be sure to subscribe to catch the next unbelievable story.